So we've got the palette here and got a really big pile of orange I'm mixing up here. This is just because I know I'm going to need a lot of paint. This is a big painting that I'm working on, so that's why such a big pile here. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of preparing these base mixtures, and I'll keep my orange, up here, so that way I can always pull into it if I need to. I'm going to get my light side, I'll get some midtones, my warmer sort of dark shadows, and then we'll get some more colors here that I typically wouldn't keep on my palette if I'm just painting a portrait or painting a body. I probably wouldn't keep quite as many colors, but I will show you all the same because for landscape it's much more useful. So over here I will start with the darker mixture. I'm just going to pull a little bit of this black. It's going to give us that nice warm brown. That's very typical, right? That's something I always talk about. I always recommend keeping on your palette. So we'll just leave that right there. Right here in the middle, I'm going to go with slightly different color than maybe what I usually keep. I don't know, it's pretty similar, I suppose, to the sort of mid-tone I like to have. So I'm just going to pull a little bit of white in here, and this white is going to help to give us more of a rich mid-tone, so it's not so dark and deep like this one, but this is going to be more useful. As you'll see, I'm going to be painting some trees, so this is just more like a typical warm brown that you'll see, and I'll keep that there. And then I'm just going to give myself a nice light color over here. So still pretty standard, I would say. I would say this is, something I'd like to have when mixing a portrait palette or even a figure palette. It'd still be pretty similar to this. So we'll just keep this over here. This will also be useful for the figures. Sorry that the palette isn't more organized. It's pretty organized for my sake, but I understand it might be a little bit tricky to understand everything that's going on, so I'll try my best here to really point it out. What I would do if I was mixing a palette, let's say, and trying to make it as organized as possible, there's only one small change I would really make. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the warm colors here, more of the cool colors are going to be up here on the top side, and then I'll have my gray down here. And instead of doing that, what I would actually do if I wanted to have like the perfect palette, let's say, I would give myself a little bit more space, bring the warm colors down here, and I'd put these gray colors in the middle. That way I can just pull either direction more easily without having to, dip across the palette. So that's the only change I would make. Otherwise, these mixtures are still very solid. So with that being said, the next thing is the gray. So I'll pull plenty of this orange down here, and I'm actually going to give myself a couple of gray type mixtures. So I'll pull some black here. We're going to mix this out. So again, this is like that darker brown, and then once we add that white to it, it's going to become pretty gray. Let's get a little bit more, and I'll leave a little bit lighter side over here, and a little bit darker over here. So now I've basically got two gray tones that I can work with. If I need to, I can always pull out some of the black. So I'll try to stay, in a similar range to these. Of course, the blue is going to be for the shadows, so this will be slightly darker. Let's see what we get here. That's pretty nice. That will be the darker blue shadows. I'll add a little bit more white. And this is going to be the lighter blue shadows right here. So something like that. And then we'll pull some of this. Actually, I'll keep that there. Pull a little bit more black. Put that black right here. Pull more of the white. We're going to do the same thing up here. Give ourselves a nice rich Apelles blue. And then I'm going to pull a little bit of my red. So this is going to make a beautiful violet right up here. Look at that. That is fantastic. So then I've got my blue, violet over here. I don't really need the green at this moment, but maybe I'll demonstrate it anyways. So I'll just pull some of the yellow and black, and that's it for the green. If you need to add white to the green, you can do it. Maybe that will be something I'll show here. But as a base mixture, I prefer to keep it nice and rich like this, so it's just black and yellow. That way I don't have to worry about desaturation. At this moment in the painting, I don't really need to worry about bright greens quite yet, so that's very suitable right there. So really that's it. I mean, there's not many differences here compared to a portrait palette. The main difference, as I pointed out, I've got some more cool colors compared to what I would typically use. Still, these could be good to have in a portrait painting anyways. Usually I would just kind of mix it on the fly, not so much having it pre-mixed, because there's not as much area unless you're planning to do a summer painting or you're planning to do something that's going to involve a lot of that cool light. But if you're going to have a cool background, then you absolutely do need it. So that's why I've got it pre-mixed here, and I'll show you. We're going to do something pretty cool here. I'm going to show the benefit of having these complements available. There's one more color that I'm going to add. This is Brilliant Yellow from Old Holland, so I'm going to put this right here. And you know what, actually I feel like this is a little bit of cheating, so just for the sake of demonstration I'm going to show you anyways. This color is one that Odd often has on his palette, and he uses this for the highlights. It's super similar to if you just take your yellow brown and you mix it with white. This one is just more convenient. I mean, it comes in the tube like this, so you've basically just got it pre-mixed. But I'll show you, so that way you can see that it's, you know, it's not like a trick of using some other yellow. It's just a convenience factor. So here's the Old Holland yellow brown, and I'll just put a little bit of this right here. This will be our Brilliant Yellow. It's just white and yellow, and that's basically the brightest color on the palette. So that's something you gotta be careful with. But if you're in a landscape type setting, you've got a lot of background, a lot of rainbow going on, then it's much easier to use this. So typically I would just kind of mix this in with my highlights, but in this setting it's more appropriate to have these bright colors. So there we go. And you can see that's pretty dang similar. This is a little bit lighter. Just add a little bit more white to it. That's the idea. It's just to give yourself that bright yellow, which I will put to use here and show you in this landscape. Now the really interesting thing that I find with the Apelles palette, and with painting in general really, is that you don't need a wide variety of colors to cover different subjects. Whether you are painting a portrait, you're painting a figure, you're painting a landscape, you're painting a still life, it doesn't really matter. You can still use the same palette, and most of the mixtures are generally going to be the same. Obviously, if you've got green trees, you need more green on the palette. If you're painting someone with darker skin, you need darker colors on the palette. But the foundations and the colors which you can mix as a base are still going to remain the same. One of those main colors is the Apelles blue, so if you're going to use Apelles blue in the background, or you want to have some kind of blue sky, something like that, or cool shadows, obviously you need to have that blue. And there's a really beautiful effect that's going to happen, which happens as a result of complementary colors. So when you have colors that are opposite from each other on the color wheel, your blue, orange, green, red, yellow, and violet, those colors work beautifully together for creating volume. And what you can do is you can take the warmer color of those two and you can place that in the foreground or in the lighter areas, and use the cooler color as the shadow or background. So for a landscape like this, I'm going to use more orange, warm colors in the foreground, and I'll have some blues and cooler colors in the background. The figures are very warm, and that background I've got that nice Apelles blue, so it helps to contrast with the figures. In some areas I've started to mix in a little bit of the blue into their bodies. I will also do more of that going forward, just to kind of emphasize some of these shadows and help balance out the whole painting in total. So the idea here is very simple. Warmer colors come towards us, cooler colors go away. At the same time, warmer colors are going to be better for your lights, cooler colors are better for your shadows. You could reverse it, but in most settings, this is going to appear much more natural. This feels much more natural. For the sake of the demonstration and painting a landscape, let's just focus on warm comes close, cool settles back. So I was having some fun painting on this tree, and I thought this would be an excellent place to show what happens when you're using these complementary colors together. And you might already start to see it a little bit, but I will show you here what I'm talking about with balancing these colors. So when you have your warmer colors, you can use that together with the cool colors and get a really interesting effect when you're creating volume or trying to create a shape. What I have here is just this kind of mixture between these two colors. Pull a little bit of orange in there, a little bit of my brilliant yellow, a little bit more yellow. And so now we've got a mixture that's on the warm side. It's got yellow, orange, a little bit of this kind of brown, but it's mostly going to be warm. And so what I can do here is I can place this in the light side. Let me make sure this is going to be in the frame. Okay, we'll do it right here. I've already got some paint there, so we'll do it right there. So this warm paint, we can pull on here, and we'll just put it down like that. And so I'm also doing something with the brush here that is very particular. I'm allowing the brush to work with the canvas. I'm not pressing super hard. If you press very hard, you can get a sharp contour. So if I want a very bold line, I can press harder into the canvas like that. But if I want it to be more broken like this, to feel rough, then I don't press as hard. I just kind of drag this over the surface. So what's happening there is this nice, beautiful Belgian linen. This is a nice rough textured surface. And so the parts that stand out are actually the only parts that are going to receive that paint, since I'm not pushing very hard into it. And then what I can do, since I've got this warm light color, I can go into the shadow side. I'll take some violet here, and I'll go into this shadow side right here, and I'll add this cool complement. So this was pretty yellow, so that's why I'm going to pull some of this violet here into the shadows. So something like that. And then what I'll do is I'll come in between the two, mix up some of this brown together with the violet that I have on my brush. And this is going to be between the two, a little bit more balanced. And we'll typically start to go towards a little bit of gray. I'll lighten it up a little bit here. Let's get some more white, some more violet. So this is going to turn, it's going to turn towards gray in the middle. So I can put that there. So this is just a really, really beautiful effect that you can use in order to create more volume and to give yourself a sense of more depth. And then if you have, maybe this edge needs to be darker, I can always pull more black here. If we want to create a sharper contour, I can always pull that in here, and we can create a deeper shadow. So this is the beauty of just balancing out your complements. They work really well together, and they add a beautiful sense of depth. So you don't have to do this in the entirety of the painting either. There's a totality, which is, the sense of depth between having your warm colors and your cool colors balanced out throughout the painting. So you have, warmer colors in the foreground, cooler colors in the background, and that's important. But you can do things like this where you're just pulling into one section of the painting, and you can let it kind of drift off. So then I could start to transition if I want to. I could grab some of my brownish color, and I can start to taper, so that way it's not quite as vibrant. I could start to pull into this, and that way it just kind of balances out, and it's more like we have this nice beautiful effect in one small area. And you can do that so you can actually drift around, and that's what I see Nerdrum does a lot that is really incredible. He will basically paint the entire rainbow into a single object, and it's just unreal when you see it in person. So he'll do something like this, and then he'll just, you know, allow that to change into a totally different combination as it moves throughout the painting. And that creates a really, really interesting effect when it comes to this temperature throughout the whole painting. And so that's something really beautiful that I really admire about Nerdrum's landscapes. You don't really see that so often, that people have such a great understanding they can create that whole rainbow of colors. And so we could start to play around with that a little bit here. You know, we could add, let's say, a little bit more red down towards the bottom, get some reds and greens or something like that, and we could create this kind of variety to add a little bit more depth. So let's see if I can show this here. So what I'll do is I'll pull into my palette here. Again, I'm going on this warmer side. I'll grab some of this orange, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into my red. So we're going to get nice and red here. And this is going to be really warm. And we can pull some of this into the base. This is very close to us, so of course it makes sense we should have some warmth. So I'll just pull some of this, say right in here. We're going to get really red. Let it drift down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull some of this green. So I'll just wipe off my brush a little bit. I'll touch a little bit of this blue, hopefully to get us more into the blue-green range. And then I'll pull some of this green. And this green, you can even add just a little touch of white so it's not too dark. Pull some more of that green. And you'll see the color here that I end up with. It's going to be greenish. So I'll pull this right along this side to contrast with that red. Let's see how it works. Make sure the color is suitable. That's nice. So I can pull some of this. And now we've got this green that's going to contrast with that red. And then it even transitions down into the purple and yellow again. So pull a little bit more deep green. Get a little bit of this for our kind of Terminator line. Very nice. So that's something you can do when you're painting various objects. You should really be considering what kind of colors are going in there. What is going to make up that mixture, and how can you play around with the temperature? Because especially when you're painting things like nature and things that maybe appear to have more color, there's a lot more room to play around, because you can just push these things in a different way where it's not going to look unnatural. It's going to still feel pretty realistic. So that is one thing I really admire about Nerdrum. It's still something I'm trying to learn, trying to do my best to get a grasp on this and hopefully figure it out. But yeah, I think it's really cool. So I hope there's something of value that you can get out of this and maybe start to apply this to some of your landscapes. I'm just gonna keep playing around here. I'll see what happens. See if we can do anything else. I like these trees and how they're coming along. So what I'll do is I'll paint a little bit further down. We'll see if we can maybe play around with this, continue the transition, and get something going here. So I'll go a little bit more, go into the yellow again. I'm going to take my brilliant yellow. We're going to put some of this into the tree. So really going towards yellow. And I'll pull this right here, this kind of little highlight. Maybe it should be even a little bit more greenish around there. So we can create like a dual transition, like we're kind of flip-flopping here. We're going from the red on the light side to the red on the shadow side. And I can even start to pull some of this in here, darken this up a little bit. We'll transition between those. So it's more green right there, more yellow green. And I'll get a little bit of orange to kind of complete the transition between the two. So we'll get a little bit orange right here. So we're going from red to orange, and then down to the yellow right there, the yellow green. And so to contrast with that, we're going to need some red and some violet. So I'll pull into the violet, get a little dab of yellow, or excuse me, get a little dab of red here, a little bit more. And this will be the shadow for that kind of yellow-green. Try to paint it so you don't get glare. Let's see. I'll start to brush over, let them mix into a more gray type color in the middle. And that's what you end up with. So that's a really beautiful effect, I think, to just kind of play around with the rainbow a little bit, to give yourself some compliments and let it transition from one color into the next, and you're just kind of moving around, and you can consider this as you're, trying to build up that form. The other thing that's going on here, which I think is really interesting, and this really helps to create depth, is if you have these variations, you're giving the eyes something more interesting to look at in a way. It kind of adds an extra layer of depth. It's like there's this weird combination, and even through these temperature shifts, even though we're changing colors, you still get the same kind of volume that's being displayed. So you could even go the opposite direction. I'm gonna get a little bit crazy here. So what I could even do now that we've even got that, now I could even start to go further. I could go more crazy with this. What I can do is I can start to paint essentially the opposite. So now I can transition, and I can start using a cool light. And I can take some of this blue, give myself a little bit more white to make this a light, and we'll start to pull some of this blue. This is gonna be really crazy. So pull some of the blue into the light side, and we'll get a blue light, just like this. We'll pull this down into the root, let this root turn very cold. I'll pull it onto a little bit of this side right here, and then we can oppose that, we can contrast that with some of the orange. So I'll take some of the orange right here, mix some of the black into it, and now we're going to get this kind of darker complement to that light blue. So we've got brown, and that will serve as the complement down here. So we're going to put this coming down, and cross over a little bit, and this will form the line right here. And so now you've got the real transition. You're shifting completely from going with a warm light, and you're going down into a cool light, and totally shifting the color play there. So that's something I think that really helps to elevate a painting. You're creating this added sense of depth. It's really bizarre. I don't know how else to explain it than you're kind of breaking through the color barrier in terms of like just putting it one way straight forward. Instead, you're adding that variety, reflects nature a little bit better, even though it's kind of a weird effect, but you're kind of breaking through, and it's like instead of just having orange and blue through the entire thing, you're switching it up, which is a little bit more how nature appears. You don't really just get one pure light source and have the same color everywhere. So it's just something I find really interesting that I've seen Nerdrum do that plenty of times. And if you really start to look at his paintings, he does it all over the place. It's really, really fascinating. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.